I know that you've been just chomping at the bit to hear my lovely voice again, right? How could you not? Actually, I think is it a little bit nasally? Feels nasally to me, but I don't know. Maybe I'm making it up. Anyway, so this episode is really fun because not only is it the first episode of the season, but it's also a recording of a live recording that we did in front of an audience of about 200 people. We did this with a company or a bookstore called P&T Knitwear in, is it Lower East Side, Soho in Manhattan. Had a great turnout, great discussion with David Ryan Polgar. David, I've known him for, you'll hear us talk about this a little bit, about 7 years. We met very early on in our kind of AI ethics, tech ethics journey. We've always been in touch, doing kind of parallel kinds of things, me on the consulting advising side, him on the nonprofit side. David founded this organization called All Tech is Human. It's a really fascinating, interesting organization, the goal of which is to bring together different kinds of stakeholders. It could be students, it could be people in government, it could be people in academia, it could be practitioners, data scientists, other kinds of technologists, bring them together in an attempt to create the kind of future that we want, with a focus on tech, of course. So what are the kinds of things that we want from big tech companies, from startups, from other kinds of organizations taking on this technology? What does that future look like, where it's not just about maximizing profits, but it's something that's good for all of us? That's, of course, what the conversation is about with David. We talk a little bit about him founding the organization and about what the mission is and why the mission is what it is. So I press him a little bit on, do you think of your organization as an activist organization? Is it something else? Are you trying to enter into rational dialogue with the powers that be? It's a really wide-ranging discussion about all these kinds of things. And one thing that I want to highlight is David's big focus or commitment to thinking about happiness and well-being of people. As an ethicist myself, and when I engage in advisory work, we try to focus on what would really be ethically wrong, what would be violations of people's rights, how would we breach our obligations to them. And so it's a lot of focus on right and wrong and avoiding the wrong stuff. David's focused on something slightly different, admirably, which is something like, I don't want to say maximizing well-being, but at least having a substantive conception of what constitutes well-being and having that weigh heavily on us as we think about how we want technology to be designed, deployed, used, so on and so forth. Great conversation. Hope you enjoy it. As always, you can find me on Substack, reedblackman.substack.com. You can find me at reedblackman.com. You can email me at em@reedblackman.com. And that's about it. You can find me in all sorts of ways. Really looking forward to the season. I'm going to bring you some new stuff. So I'll bring you a little bit more regular episodes on what does cutting edge AI risk avoidance look like. So I'll have data scientists come on and talk to us about what's the latest in the research on that front. And we'll also talk a little bit more. We'll have some episodes specialized on, hey, what are the biggest things in the headlines? Not from a AI's amazing standpoint. We've got plenty of those people, but what are the kinds of real life cases of AI maybe not going very ethically well or going ethically sideways? What do we see in the news? So though I won't do that every episode, of course, but every once in a while we'll revisit or visit what's going on with AI ethics in the world today. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with David, and thanks for coming back.
We are talking about AI is potentially creating a sad future, so feel free to bring on the tears.
So I asked David to be on the podcast a while back, and David and I have known each other for
a couple of years, yeah.
Couple, like second.
That's a couple.
That's a couple weeks. And I said, yeah, let's do an episode. He said, yeah, sure. And he said, people are they're anxious, they're stressed right now with all that's going on in the world today, geopolitics. And we should try to lighten the mood and just bring people up a little bit. And I said, that sounds great. What do you want to talk about? And he said, sadness. How AI is making everyone sad.
Yeah. I guess I have to work on that. I think everybody is in a funk. And
it's AI's fault.
I think AI, without us taking control over it, somebody is always leading our future. And sometimes we think of it like this idea. I'll bring back an old commercial, that you might remember. It was an infomercial by... No, this is... That was a good one. But there's also Ron Popeil. Remember Ron Popeil? He was a famous
Yes.
guy. He had this rotisserie.
Oh,
and
set
he
it
had
and forget it.
Set it and forget it. And I think that is like an illustrative phrase because
This is a young crowd. They're not going to know set it.
no, you can go
Raise
on
your hand if you know
YouTube.
set it and forget it.
There we go.
Okay. I got one move.
Wow, I need to work on my references.
Yeah, I mean,
is what
you're
you're
really dating
saying.
yourself.
But the point is, you can go on YouTube, you can see it. They were famous at the time. You also talked about where's the beef. That might even be old.
Yeah, sure.
But the point being is that I think a lot of times we have this false belief that technology is just naturally unraveling, and that we are just these we're passengers on this kind of plane that is just taking us off in a direction, and then we just hear from futurists about what is this future going to look like, as opposed to realizing somebody's always driving the plane. And if we think that nobody's driving the plane, then that's just like an illusion created by somebody who's probably trying to sell a vision. But I think a lot of times we're the ones who have to control that.
Okay, so let's back up though. So
Let's back up, yeah.
Because you want us to control, you want us to steer away from the sad future that AI is bringing us.
Yes.
So what's the
Yeah.
sadness that you see?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you think about all of the innovations that are happening recently, right? You were thinking about, do I know if I'm speaking to a person or a chatbot, right? Did this person actually write an email to me, or did they just create it and then send it over? Are there going to be jobs for us in the future? What's going to happen to the environment from all these data centers, right? That doesn't necessarily make me feel like, wow, this is the joy of innovation. Whereas if you look at it over the last 30, 40 years, the rise of the web, and I think this is why a lot of people are getting involved in the space, the rise of the web was originally optimistic. It was effectively saying that we're going to tear down the walls of like geography. We're going to have all the world's knowledge, whether you're in Kathmandu or Timbuktu, you're going to have all the world's knowledge that's going to make us more enlightened. Obviously, it didn't work out that way, right? It didn't work out that way. But the point was, we actually thought that innovation was associated with enlightenment and was associated with happiness, was associated with plurality and less violence and more understanding. And now I think our tech future, the way it's positioned by a lot of leaders, it's not necessarily a future that I would want to live in.
All right, so let me give you a big question.
The questions?
This is my skeptical side. This is my like eye rolling side coming out, which honestly is 90% of my side.
This is where we need the close-up so we can see the eye roll.
Okay, we talk about AI for good, AI should make us happier, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. I suppose I say, that sounds lovely, but AI is tiny in relation to massive social political systems.
Yeah.
How wealth gets distributed is not a function of AI as such, it's a function of how our society, politicians, government structures, et cetera, decide to interact with that one variable that is AI. And we talk about AI making us sad, but really it's one variable among many, and it's a variable with relatively little power in comparison to all the other variables out there.
That is true, but I think that's...
Right, next question.
Great, I think that's also why we need to treat AI as a function of human decisions. And I think that's why we had Rebecca do an interview with Karen Howe, who has new Empire of AI book. And I think one of the reasons why that book is doing so well, and a lot of people are talking about it, is because it's effectively saying we need to take back control over this. And that, to your point, AI is one small part, but it's like it's an aspect of where we're going as a society and what we think is like an ideal future for how people even communicate. Even just think about all the debates we have over phone usage in schools. It's a big thing, right, in New York State. I think we're also trying to get at what's our best relationship with technology, right? How to weave that into our lives.
Okay, so let me accuse you of more pie in the sky ideals. I don't know why I keep moving this microphone.
Maybe you're a singer. You want to do some nightclub.
Like a tie
For sure.
We should take back control. What does that actually mean? I mean, you don't have shares in OpenAI. We don't get to decide how corporations act, except in some very broad sense of we decide with our laws, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, we should get together, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and we should take control of AI.
Yeah.
Short of overthrowing capitalism, What does that actually look like?
Yeah. So All Tech is Human is set up for a larger idea, systemic kind of change. And I think a lot of times it can feel something that you can't get over, that how is something going to alter. But I think this is why we're trying to hit it from a lot of different angles. Because I think even the conversation about how you speak about a topic is going to influence future legislation. It's going to influence how we incorporate something in our lives. For example, even with All Tech is Human, one of the things that we did early on was we focused on saying, okay, there's all these different sub-communities. Let's have this under a broader umbrella of responsible tech. And now I run into a 20-year-old who says, I want to get into responsible tech. That didn't exist, right? So it moves the Overton window a certain extent, whereas then it changes the future workforce, and it changes the university setting of what courses they're going to offer, or what programs they're going to offer. And that's where that like systemic change starts to happen. So I think, to your point, it can seem quite impossible, but if you start realizing all these different pressure points that exist of saying, hey, how do we change the legislation? How do we change the education? How do we think about individual kind of empowerment? How do we think about like the trust and safety, responsible AI communities that are inside of these systems? Then you're dealing with it in multiple dimensions. So it's not pie in the sky. I think it's more seeing all these different levers of change and how can those push over. So I think one of the big things that always happens, I know on my end, is people always are looking for one answer. They're saying, oh, are you saying it's because we have a bunch of old senators? Are you saying it's because, you know, the kids today, they don't know what they're downloading? So you always have these accusations over one aspect. And the answer I always give is, it's all of the above. I think that's the larger part, is like these pieces come together. So that's why one of the analogies we like to use a lot is the Rubik's Cube, is that every part is affecting another part of the system.
I was hoping the answer was going to be that you go on a hunger strike. That'd be really inspiring. I think that's what you should do.
I could do that.
Come on, just what a hunger strike.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
You could be the responsible AI.
We can make it happen. There's a lot of options.
I thought you were committed to the cause.
I am very committed.
But I heard here, folks. But hold on, hunger strike. We're
gonna start that today. But no, I think the larger kind of point with that is so many things in our lifetime have seemed like impossible to change.
Yeah.
So the example that just popped into my brain is, I remember years ago, we still see President Obama a lot. But if you remember, if you were around when he was in office, they really struggled at the time of saying, are we going to support gay marriage? And they never thought that would move as quick as it did.
Sure.
But it worked like a domino effect. First, years before, you had Vermont that was talking about like civil partnerships, and then people started switching the Overton window, and then it just became widely accepted.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same type of issue, is that language spreads like a contagion. And the more you start influencing certain spaces, then you realize things can actually change a lot quicker because you create that like cascading effect.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I don't think anyone could deny that responsible AI or AI ethics, whatever you want to call it, has risen since we met 7 years ago.
Yeah, it has. A couple of years ago.
A couple, same thing. And I'm confident that has been, at least in part, a function of the work you've done and other people have done in the space to actually push the conversation. So it's a different kind of question. I suppose one is, do you think of big tech / Silicon Valley as the enemy in some sense? Do you think about it as having a target? And then the second question related to that is, how do you think about what your relationship is meant to be with them? Is it meant to be one in which you engage in rational dialogue, to discourse with them, a conversation with them, and so that you're aiming for rational persuasion of the tech bros to be not so tech pro-y? Or do you see it as most of them are full tech bro? Rational conversation out the window with them, they've got fundamentally different values, fundamentally different goals. This is about power, and so what we need to do is create a stronger power base to push against the opposing power and the opposing force, as opposed to a discussion between two rational entities.
Right. Yeah, I always view the world through like power dynamics. So I do think it is like a whole power issue of who's having it. Dealing with kind of big tech, it's a few things, right? So with All Tech is Human, And I remember I had to push back with a lot of people early on when we launched. We always see it as saying you meet somebody where they're at. So when I'm thinking about how you make this change, I don't view Authentic as human in kind of an adversarial type of setup that you would have in a lot of other organizations. We launched it around the same time as Center for Humane Technology. That was set up as former people in larger tech companies, now in the tech reformer type of space. That was set up in more direct competition. Whereas when I was looking in 2018 and saying, I don't want to create a redundancy, what it's missing, what I saw missing was an independent body that could be a connective tissue for dialogue across society, government, industry, academia, to have those conversations. But to your point, that is a tough area because I think everybody, myself included, is trying to decide how do you create space for rational dialogue without being somebody's useful idiot. So that's a huge danger, is that a lot of nonprofits can get used, can be utilized for PR and comms, and you don't want to do that. If that was ever the case, then I would just, show's over, because then what's the point? The point is not to keep something running, the point is to make a difference. And I think, I will also say, Reed, to that, obviously there's been a lot of reasons why we've created this, why there is this trust. But one of the things that I've noticed, which is another part that we need to examine, is that the people who are at a top of a tech company are totally different than the people who are like working in trust and safety teams.
Sure.
So oftentimes there's this real disconnect because somebody will go from working in trust and safety and then they'll be a professor at NYU and then they'll go over to a startup, right? So we treat people as if they're like branded as, oh, they're an industry person or they're like an academic, when in fact, there's a corollary between all of these different areas. You don't think all tech companies are like soaking up top talent, but that's what OpenAI and Anthropic obviously are doing. And I think the larger point there is change doesn't just happen from, again, in a lot of different ways, but it doesn't just happen by saying us against them. That's one model, and that needs to exist. That's more like an activist model, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas we're set up like imagine like a Davos where everybody can go to, or a UN that can move at the speed of tech. There needs to be this independent body that can actually bring people together to say, here's a problem. Like right now, I was just thinking about like notification apps, where a lot of people were talking about the Meta AI chatbots and sexualized content and also racial content that's really bothersome. So you have these topics that pop up, but we don't usually have approaches or systems that actually say, okay, how do we think about the legal, the emotional, the ethical, right, the technical? How do we bring those sides together and tackle that? And that's what I see. So the larger point, to fully answer it, we work with the larger tech companies, but also take it with a grain of salt to make sure that we're not being used.
Sure.
And then also realizing that change happens inside, outside, and then in the startup system of reimagining tech features.
So it sounds, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, it sounds like you think one of the biggest places to push is something like in the educational system. Is there...
Oh, definitely, I definitely think so. And then, but I would, to go back to the all of the above, I would also argue that self-regulation is not working.
Sure.
And I think Congress in the United States has ceded way too much power.
Just all of it. All of it, not that much.
But I think that's the struggle, is that I always think back to that Spider-Man meme where there's three of them, they're all pointing at each other. Because that's the way we usually feel right now with the business or industry, and then we feel that with the government, and then the individuals. Is everybody is like blaming the other when complex topics, when you think about driving a car, you naturally are weaving together government that is putting a police officer to make sure that you're not speeding, that has to fix a pothole to make sure that you don't get injured. You have the regulation around your car, and then you have the fact that you took a license and you have your hands a certain way. So you have the individual autonomy meets the business side, meets the government side, and there's an interplay.
Yeah.
So we haven't gotten used to the interplay that happens, I think, in like an emerging technology space.
couple of questions.
Let's do it.
One, I want to hear more. I actually want to talk more about sadness and what is the You articulated some.
I know. I was getting too happy there. I kind of had a smile on my face, and you're like, I'm going to go in for
it. It doesn't fit you. There's the short-term sad things you already mentioned, which mostly felt like anxiety about, oh my God, my talking to a person or a chatbot, oh my God, my lose my job. So there's anxiety, this is a little more short-term.
That's true.
I think I want to hear more about what you think of as the long-term sadness.
Okay.
The one thing I want to hear about, and then the other thing that I want to hear about, which is just a totally different topic, but I'm just going to say it while I'm thinking about it, is something like, I want to get clear whether you have a vision of what the future looks like, and here's the future, here's the vision that we should be driving towards, as opposed to, here's the process by which I see the future should come about. So what I mean by that is, you talk about we should have control, we should get control over this stuff. And that sounds a little bit about outcome, but more about the process by which the tech ultimately impacts us. So, two totally separate questions. One's about the sadness stuff and what does that look like, but the other is a little bit more, maybe it's in the weeds, but do you think of the goal of an organization like Alltech as human as we need to secure a certain kind of outcome, or we need to secure whatever outcome is the result of, let's just call it something like fair and democratic process, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, I'll answer that question since that was more complex than the sadness one. So I'm going to start with that. I do view all of our systems as breaking. I think even in the United States, we're anxious because we feel like 18th century documents are not working in the 21st century. People are actually saying maybe we need a constitutional convention, and I would agree with that. So I think we're actually reaching a point where our systems don't really work anymore. So if I'm imagining the future, a future I would want to live in is almost this kind of merging, like a social media democracy or emerging technology democracy.
Social media democracy sounds like a oxymoron.
No, well, but in the sense that what we're struggling with is technology is greatly outpacing our ability to consider its social impacts, right? So we talk about the speed of technology is rapidly increasing. Our slowness of consideration to create safeguards is painfully slow. So you have that delta between the two, and therein lies the rub. You take issues like happened a few years ago in San Francisco, where they really pushed back against like facial recognition, and that's San Francisco, right? But that shows you that we don't have a system to actually say, how do we consider the civil liberty trade-offs with facial recognition? But at the same time, we care about safety, so it has some value right there. How do we incorporate this? If we're going to incorporate it, how do we make sure it's incorporated fairly? But then it gets placed into the wild, and then the general public says, whoa, I didn't give my consent. They didn't give any implied consent. So I think therein lies the problem. So in my kind of imagined better tech future, we would have a system for actually saying, okay, right now we're dealing with generative AI that's creating a huge issue with content, where you can create music really simply, and that could potentially put musicians out of work. And that would be a transition and connective tissue, I think, to sadness. Because I would be sad in the future if there is lots of music that I can listen to, but there's not musicians who are pouring out their heart. Because I think that is the fine-tuned difference, is that what makes people sad and what makes me sad about it is if you accept music as saying it's about the music, you're missing the damn point, right? It's about somebody's experience or relationship, and you're creating like a parasocial relationship with them. You can imagine your own past or future. Like that's the value. So I think that what's happening, and the reason why I would worry about a sad future, is that the people who are leading it tend to be a type of person, we generalize, a type of person who is more wowed about innovation and lacking in thinking about the heart and thinking about why we create art, right? What is the meaning behind it? So what I would worry about and what would make me sad is if we have a future that is like full but hollow, right? That's the difference. So I'll give you a specific example. I remember a few months ago reading about self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, and how they're trying to roll them out, right, across the world. But then you walk through that scenario and you say, okay, great. I get off the airplane and I get picked up, and now I don't have somebody to talk to. Like, how is that advancement? If technology by its very purpose should advance us, should raise the human condition, should make our lives easier, you're missing the point. Like, I think it's in a direction of technological advancement without human appreciation.
So I'm going to slightly rephrase what you said. You tell me if I got it wrong. I actually think you're speaking about something. There's a lot of things you can talk about in AI ethics world, and we're talking about content and IP stuff, and don't give out work. But I actually think the focus of your concern is people being alienated from other people.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
As opposed to doing the right thing and the wrong thing.
Yeah.
There's one way to go about things is to say they're doing the ethically wrong thing, they're breaching their moral obligations, they're violating people's rights. And I think if I'm hearing you, you're less focused on that, although you do want to redo the Constitution, which is slightly concerning. But that's aside.
No, listen, most countries do amend the Constitution a lot easier. The United States does make it.
No, that's true, actually. We have some amendments. I'm just not sure how far the revolution is now. But you are committed to the hunger strike, so I guess it's pretty far. But I find this interesting because in the AIS world, we talk a lot about what's right and wrong in people's rights and violations of people's human rights and all that. And you're talking about a different kind of thing, primarily at least, which is we are alienated from each other, we're alienated from the artist who creates the artwork, we're alienated from, at least not alienated from, we miss an opportunity for connection with another person when we have a robo-taxi instead of a taxi driver. Yeah, so I guess easy question. Is that at the core of it? It's I have followed, but is that the core of it?
That's 100% the core of it. So I'm glad you picked up on that, because that's even what inspired me personally to start All It Takes Is Human, is reading books like Hole and Alone by Robert Putnam, Alone Together by Sherry Turkle. So I always saw...
You just listen to Piano Man, it would have been much better.
I should have.
Sherry Turkle called Loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. You saved all that time reading those books.
But they impacted me, right? They impacted me because, again, if advancement is going in an opposite direction as human connection, then it's no advancement. So that's the crisis. There's the crisis of connection. I think everybody knows that, and I think even the proof's in the pudding, right? Like, we have gatherings, lots of people attend our gatherings, right? I don't think they're always here just for the conversation. I think they're here for community. I think we're still people, right? At the end of the day, like, we're still in this together. And I think that fundamentally, whether we verbalize it or not, we recognize that something is deteriorating, and that something that nags at us might be like our humanness. And we're always trying to fight back and get that equilibrium. So for example, even before I started All It Takes Is Human, I've always been doing a lot of writing and speaking about tech ethics, the impact of technology on us. And I remember, like, and this is still proven to be true, ever since the release of the iPhone, vinyl record sales have gone up. And that would always surprise a lot of people. And then I remember, even if you go back really far, but I'm giving these old references, you had when people were getting into like e-readers. And in every futurist out there, that's why you gotta take that with a grain of salt, would say,
it's nonsense.
But the point is, because everybody was thinking in terms of utility. And that is a BS way to look at the world, because that is not the way humans make decisions. We're irrational beings. So for example, everybody said, why the hell would there be books? Why would there be physical books? We're literally doing this discussion in 2025 in a physical bookstore that every futurist predicted 15 years ago wouldn't exist. People are buying.
Here's your radio show.
Exactly, right. Even podcasting, right? Like, big thing early on. Everything is coming back because we are still people living in this physical world who actually want experience, who actually want to find joy or find connection, right? So everything I do, the way I filter the world is I'm saying, we have emerging technology, that's great, but I don't attribute that to the technology, I attribute that to our innovation. Humans are cool because we're the ones creating the damn thing, right? It's not the technology. I could care less. It's us, that we're the ones creating. But at the same time, I don't think that we've changed that much. And that's why a bunch of years ago, when everybody was saying we go to the metaverse, I also said, BS.
So dumb. Why did anyone think that for a second? That was legit.
But we listened to the people who were trying to sell it, because they were trying to sell a vision that would affect affect the share price.
Yeah.
And therein lies why we need to be skeptical over people who are trying to sell us a vision that are also selling us a product, because that means that they're naturally biased. So the point is, the reason why I looked at that and said, that sounds ridiculous, is because that doesn't solve our fundamental need, right? No matter what year it is, we're still going to care about friendship, food, sex. It's very base, right? Humans don't change that much, and we haven't changed that much. So if anything, I look at today, and I look at the predictions people were saying 15 years ago, and I'm saying, actually, there's some crazy parts that have happened, but at the same time, we're still wanting to meet somebody at a coffee house. We're still wanting to have awe and experience. Like, we're not transcending to something, right? We're here, and we're trying to experience it, and I think we're always trying to fight back to say, how do I maximize that? And what am I missing when something else is maybe innovating and taking away?
Yeah, I hate the whole maximizing stuff, by the way. Okay. I hate the whole maximizing stuff. No one should be measuring anything.
Yeah.
Take the ring off.
That's why I remember a couple of years.
Here's spoiler, you're gonna die. It's fine. Take the ring off, don't put it on.
It was like a couple of years ago, which might have been 7 or more, everybody was talking about like the quantified self movement. Remember that?
I want nothing to do with it.
Why do I want to measure my sleep every night and be obsessed with that? That is moving away from the very point
It's
of like
regard yourself as a tool by which you produce more heartbeats. What the hell's the point of that? That's the dumbest possible way to live your life.
I'm glad we agree.
All right. I'll say one last thing, which is, I agree. So this is all an agreement. I would just frame it slightly differently.
You're agreeing with me a lot. I thought you were going to massively disagree.
I'm not. I'm such I'm easygoing.
Good.
I have no views. Only Jewish philosopher has no views at all. No opinions. That's not true. Okay, so I would say that you're right that they're concerned about utility. A lot of technology is concerned about utility. At one point, I think you said, well, we're not rational creatures. I would actually say, no, it's perfectly rational to want human connection. There's nothing irrational about it. To equate rationality with maximizing utility is a bananas view. I guess I do have some opinions.
But what I mean about...
I agree with you, right. And what's really the problem with them is that they have a completely impoverished conception of what constitutes well-being. Well-being is not just feeling a certain way. Well-being has to do with a variety of factors, including the kinds of social relationships that you have, the kind of community that you're embedded in, blah, 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 blah. So it's not like you can look inside someone's head with an MRI. I don't know what MRI is. Measure their dopamine level. How the hell you probably don't use an MRI to measure dopamine, but whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The dopamine reader on your stupid ring on your finger, that's not how you figure out whether someone is happy. I don't think they can make any progress unless they don't think of lack of maximizing utility as irrational, and they do have a much more substantive conception of well-being, such that it's not the kind of thing that's just maximized along one metric or something along those lines. So that's the agreement.
But I would say with that, Reed, I think the problem is numbers throw off our brain. So even early
That's why I never learned to add or subtract. It's the path of the devil.
But when early on with social media, obviously we had that obsession with numbers of friends because we were equating the number, because that's something we can quantify, with happiness, because we're like, wait a minute, maybe that's like an achievement side. And I feel like we're going through that same danger right now with generative AI and creating messages. Even take something that people don't usually think is like cutting edge, like LinkedIn. I always find it intriguing how they try to incentivize you to streamline your communication. Because on one hand, it's good to be efficient. You have to be efficient. We all have too many emails, too many things to do. But at the same time, that's also missing the point. Because I'm sure that you've had a birthday card in the past and the person always says, or a gift, it's a thought that counts. And I feel like we're forgetting that very simple phrase with communication, because communication is also based on reciprocity. If I think that, Reed, that you were thinking about me, I was like, what is that guy up to? I wonder. Usually about late at night.
A few times a day.
But then if you text me or you wrote me, I say, oh wow, like you spent some time thinking about that, and that also affects how I am going to respond. And I think that is the tricky part of what's happening, is because we're trying to give one side a shortcut But the kind of like rich irony to that, which happened in this famous book called Marionettes Inc., right, where one person tries to create a bot to say, I can save my life. He's trying to make a robot of himself because so he doesn't have to converse with his wife. Like, this is the story. But the irony is the wife gets him back because she already created her own robot. So you have two robots who are talking to each other. And that's the kind of future, and that was by Ray Bradbury, that's the kind of future that I would be afraid that we could have if you effectively have people thinking that communication is about efficiency as opposed to reciprocity, care, connection. It's totally different things. You can care about somebody and try to be efficient at the same time, but if you're totally bereft of the human connection part, then you're just spamming people.
Last question.
Sure.
This is a layup, easy one.
All right.
Although I can't do a layup, I don't know why. Layups are hard, especially if you're short. I don't know why that's the go-to expression for it.
We can lower the hoop.
We'll have you can lower the hoop all day. Doesn't matter. If I
We'll do
can't
the
step
nerve.
over it,
We'll do the nerve. Yeah.
Okay. People can do one thing to take control. Aside from the hunger strike, aside from a hallucion, what are they doing tomorrow?
I think the biggest mistake that people make is trying to think in a individual capacity, because a lot of times when something happens and there's like a controversy, people are like, then I'm just going to delete Instagram. I'm going to do this. And I'm like, okay, that's great. You make your own decision, do your thing. But at the same time, that doesn't solve the underlying problem. So I would say if you do one thing, and this is what I do, right, with All Things Human, it's joining a community because we can do more together. And the biggest thing that always happens is people, let's say, raise your hand if this is your first All Things Human event. Oh wow, so we got a lot of newbies.
You're welcome.
Like I was saying before, it's because I ran your photo and it drew in the tickets. So the point there is, a lot of times, like the biggest message, the most common message I get is somebody will write me, and this has happened for like a decade. People are like, David, it's just you and me. We're the only two guys who care about this. I wish there was more. And I always have to say, I love it how you care, but I gotta tell you, like, there's a lot of people who care, and they're all different people, all different backgrounds, right? All across the globe. And our challenge is to actually weave that together, to actually showcase that it's like a collective kind of movement. So if there's one thing you can do, it's find the others.
Sounds great.
Let's do it.
Thanks for calling Ethical Machines.
Thank you,
Let me
Reed.
know when the future's happening.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna have a happy future. I feel happy already. So thank you all for being here.
Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I want to thank a few people who make this all possible. Delano Alexander, he's my producer. He does such an amazing job on everything that he touches. Garrett Lang is the sound engineer. That's honestly, he's too good for me. Athmia Jairam has joined us recently. He's helping us find the best guests to bring onto this podcast. And Ashley Wasilenko helps us organize all this, get people on the schedule, get people's bios, headshots, and really keeps the train on the track. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate all the hard work you do.